Imagine holding in your hands fragments of ancient manuscripts that challenge everything we know about the origins of the New Testament, buried for nearly 2 millennia. These pieces of parchment, discovered in the caves of Qumran and known as the Dead Sea Scrolls, could contain traces of the Gospels, the very words that shaped the foundations of Christianity. But why has the world not accepted this groundbreaking discovery? What if I told you that fragments of the New Testament were hidden among these ancient texts, long before the prophecies they contain came to pass? Today we delve into the meticulous work of Professor Jose O'Callaghan, the scholar who dared to link these fragments to the New Testament. We explore what this means for our understanding of history, prophecy, and faith. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered between 1947 and 1956 in the caves of Qumran near the Dead Sea, are among the most significant archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. These ancient manuscripts, dating back to the Second Temple period, provide valuable insights into the religious practices and beliefs of the Jewish community of that time. But beyond the expected Old Testament scriptures and apocryphal texts, some scholars, notably Professor Jose O'Callaghan, have suggested that these scrolls contain fragments of the New Testament, predating the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Qumran, located on the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea, was home to a Jewish sect often associated with the Essenes. This community lived in isolation, dedicated to preserving their scriptures and other religious writings. The scrolls they left behind include biblical manuscripts, sectarian documents, and texts reflecting the intense apocalyptic expectations of the era. The community was ultimately destroyed by the Romans around the same time as the Second Temple, in 68 AD. This is where the potential connection to the New Testament becomes fascinating. If fragments of the New Testament were indeed among these scrolls, it would suggest that parts of the Gospels were circulating and considered significant enough to be preserved alongside the most sacred Jewish texts, well before the cataclysmic events of 70 AD. One of the most important and controversial discoveries from Qumran is the fragment 7q5. This small piece of parchment contains partial words that closely match verses 52 and 53 of Mark 6, describing Jesus and his disciples landing at Gennesaret. For they had not understood the miracle of the loaves, because their hearts were hardened. After they had crossed the sea, they came to the land of Gennesaret and anchored there. Professor Jose O'Callaghan meticulously analyzed this fragment, comparing the visible letters with biblical and non-biblical ancient texts. He concluded that the sequence perfectly matched this passage from the Gospel of Mark. His research indicated that no other known text from that time contained this exact combination of letters and spacing, making the identification with the Gospel of Mark highly probable. Fragment 7q4 contains parts of a phrase that may correspond to 1 Timothy 3 verse 16. He who was manifested in the flesh, justified by the Spirit, seen by angels, preached among the Gentiles, believed on in the world, taken up in glory. Fragments 7q8 and 7q12 may correspond to passages from Romans 10 verse 8 to 9 and Mark 4 verse 28. Romans 10 verse 8 to 9 states, "But what does it say? The word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. And this is the word of faith that we proclaim. If you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved." Mark 4 verse 28 says, "The earth produces by itself first the blade, then the ear, then the full grain in the ear." O'Callaghan identified these fragments as corresponding to the specific wording and context of these New Testament passages, suggesting their possible origin from these texts. O'Callaghan's method involved a detailed comparison of the Qumran fragments with a comprehensive collection of ancient texts. He focused on matching letter sequences, spacing, and context to identify the most likely sources of these fragments. His analysis concluded that these sequences uniquely corresponded to passages from the New Testament. However, his conclusions have been met with criticism. Some scholars argue that the fragments are too small and incomplete to allow for definitive identifications, suggesting that other yet undiscovered texts might potentially share these sequences. Despite this, O'Callaghan's discoveries have sparked ongoing debate and further research into the presence of early Christian texts among the Dead Sea Scrolls. It is crucial to consider that the presence of numerous fragments that perfectly match New Testament texts, and that only New Testament texts support, strongly reinforces their authenticity. According to biblical and Christian tradition, these writings existed at that time, and the fact that these fragments match so precisely and are found in such quantity makes it logical to conclude that they do indeed originate from the New Testament. The potential identification of New Testament fragments among the Dead Sea Scrolls has profound chronological implications. If these fragments truly come from early Christian texts, it suggests that these writings were in circulation well before the destruction of Qumran in 68 AD. This would place the composition of these New Testament books within the lifetime of the apostles and contemporaries of Jesus, providing compelling evidence of their early authorship. This timeline is crucial as it intersects with significant historical events, such as the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD and the fall of Qumran shortly before that. If these fragments were indeed present at Qumran before its destruction, it implies that the texts they belong to were already recognized and valued by early Christian communities at a very early stage, perhaps even before the widespread dissemination of the Gospel writings. For example, the potential fragment of Mark could indicate that the Gospel of Mark, often considered the earliest Gospel, was composed and distributed just a few decades after Jesus' death. This aligns with the idea that the Gospel of Mark was written around the 60s AD, corroborating early church tradition, that it was authored by John Mark, a companion of the Apostle Peter. Moreover, the presence of these fragments at Qumran, a community traditionally associated with Jewish texts and apocalyptic writings, suggests a closer interaction between early Christian and Jewish communities than previously thought. The idea that Christian texts could be preserved alongside Jewish scriptures highlights the significance of these writings in the religious landscape of the first century. The connection with Luke 21 verse 20 to 24, where Jesus predicts the destruction of Jerusalem, also takes on new weight. If these texts were indeed written and circulated before 70 AD, it lends credibility to the prophetic nature of Jesus' statements, showing that the prophecy was recorded before its fulfillment. The destruction of Jerusalem and the fall of Qumran would then serve as historical markers, affirming the authenticity and timeline of these New Testament writings. In summary, the potential discovery of New Testament fragments among the Dead Sea Scrolls not only challenges our understanding of the chronology of these texts, but also strengthens their historical significance. It suggests that the Gospels and epistles were not only written earlier than some have claimed, but were also widely distributed and revered by early Christian communities, even in remote locations. If you found this exploration of early Christian history insightful, please like, share, and subscribe for more content that strengthens our faith. We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and may God bless you.